Hello and welcome to another video on FS Elite. I'm Tom and today we will be doing a comparison of Orbx's and Verticalsim's Boise Air Terminal, or Go in Field from Microsoft Flight Simulator. This video will show similar clips of both airports, one after the other, with the Orbx version being shown first. There are a few clips where only one developer will be presented, as only one of the developers created that feature. These shots will be labeled. Both of these products released within a few months of each other, with the Orbx version releasing at the beginning of June 2022, and the Verticalsim version releasing mid-July 2022. This video focuses on the most recent version of both products at the time of recording, Orbx's being version 1.0.1, and Verticalsim's being version 1.0.0. Starting in the main terminal area, we immediately notice that the Orbx version does not have a terminal interior, whereas the Verticalsim version does. However, the geometry and details of the terminal exterior are more correct on the Orbx version, such as the offset glass panes and associated metal framing. The ground textures around the terminal on the Orbx version do not match what I can see on Google and Bing Maps imagery, and the aircraft parking markers appear to be facing the wrong way for all gates. The Verticalsim version is much more accurate, and the level of detail in the textures of the pavement itself are of a higher quality. Only one gate appeared to have a layering issue, but overall much better looking than the Orbx version. Verticalsim's version also has much more ground clutter objects in the form of baggage carts, cones, vehicles, animated people, and other small details. The Orbx version in comparison is very stark and lifeless. This carries over to the FedEx cargo area as well, with more accurate markings and textures, plus more clutter objects being present. The Verticalsim terminal interior has animated passengers, nice lighting, and some other details that make it look fairly representative of the real thing. Over by the regional gates of Terminal C, we see a similar story. There are more finer details present in the Verticalsim version, with more accurate ground markings and higher quality textures than the Orbx version. Verticalsim also included some static Dash 8s of Horizon Air, and appear to have included the more recent Jetway edition. Both sceneries have transparent windows for both legs of Terminal C with a hollow interior. Neither scenery did interior modeling of the main terminal. Moving northwest to a GA area, we see multiple FBOs and maintenance facilities. Once again, Verticalsim takes the lead with their more accurate textures and ground markings. Verticalsim's version also has plenty of smaller details around the buildings in this region and appears to use higher quality satellite imagery compared to Orbx. The areas around the buildings with Orbx's version just look barren to me. There is a typo on the Verticalsim version of the Firehawk helicopters building that isn't present in the Orbx version. On the approach path to the Tens, you would fly over a body of water on short final. Thanks to World Update 10, the changes Microsoft made to this area caused the water to flood in the default scenery. The Orbx version appears to have corrected this flooding, while the Verticalsim version has corrected a portion of it just under the approach. There is also a satellite imagery mismatch on the opposite approach to the 2.8s that is also due to the world update that neither scenery has corrected. Orbx's version of Boise has a jagged airport perimeter where their imagery and the surrounding imagery meet, while Verticalsim's appears to match very well. Crossing the runways to the southwest side, we have a number of other GA hangars and FBOs as well as a UPS freight area. The pattern continues here where Verticalsim has plenty of additional details that Orbx does not, with many inaccuracies existing in the Orbx ground markings and pavement texturing. The buildings for the Orbx versions lack many of the smaller details that are present in the Verticalsim versions, like different pipes or ventilation ducts or overhangs and ramps. This remains true for all of their buildings in the scenery. I'll let some of the video speak for itself for a bit. Moving down to the Air National Guard area, I do like that the Orbx version included static aircraft models, though they all have the same textures and registration numbers. The buildings and texture work for the ground are once again better in the Verticalsim version. And while the helipad in this area isn't exactly done correctly in Verticalsim's version, Orbx barely even touched it in theirs and didn't bother to give it any markings. Both sceneries modeled the display aircraft on the land side of the Air National Guard area. I do like the Orbx representation a bit more since they did paint out the aircraft from the satellite imagery, giving it a more realistic look, though they are missing the T-33 model that is in the Verticalsim version. Heading further southeast, the Orbx version again includes static helicopter models of the Army National Guard ramp, while the Verticalsim version is empty. As expected though, the Verticalsim version continues to have the more accurate groundwork in comparison. The air traffic control tower looks pretty good in both versions. However, the Verticalsim version has transparent glass with a very lightly modeled interior, unlike the Orbx version. Following the taxiway out of the UH-60 ramp, we find a taxiway that is marked as restricted and a helipad. Orbx didn't bother to mark the restricted area at all, and, like the previous helipad, also neglected the markings on this one. Leading out from this area, there is a long taxiway going to a SkyWest and Idaho Transportation Department hangars. The taxiway is again devoid of any markings in the Orbx version, and the Transportation Department hangar is completely missing. Verticalsim has both. Going back across the runways, the Orbx version of the scenery does have some very basically modeled buildings at the US Customs and Border Protection Facility, while this remains flat imagery in the Verticalsim version. Verticalsim does, however, have accurate taxiway markings and textures for the adjacent taxiways, while Orbx, again, didn't make an attempt to have accurate markings here. Continuing up through the remainder of the hangars and FBOs, we see a similar story being told. The Orbx versions are very basic and seem to cover the bare minimum to get the general appearance of the structures and ramps, while the Verticalsim version has a noticeable increase in detail, and the ramp textures and markings are much higher quality and more accurate. From what I can tell, the Bing Maps imagery of the airport is more up to date than the Google Earth imagery, and in that it shows the Boise Fire Station with a bit of an expansion. The Orbx model does include this, but the Verticalsim model looks like the older representation. At night, the Verticalsim version looks much better than the Orbx version. The buildings are much more illuminated as one might expect for an airport terminal, and it feels like more attention was given to it in general throughout the airport. The one point I will give to Orbx here is I do prefer the way they did the night lighting on the windows of the main terminal that doesn't have the interior modeled. It, to me, gives the impression that there's actually something going on within the building with different lights and signs rather than just a flat glow. The Orbx version does have interior lighting on the windows of the hangars and FBOs, while Verticalsim's doesn't. That isn't necessarily good or bad, but probably more dependent on whether or not those facilities keep their lights on at night or after closing or not. Both sceneries did some modeling for some landside buildings behind the terminal, with Verticalsim's being the more detailed ones. The same can be said for details on the landside portion of the terminal itself and the parking garage. Overall, if I had to pick one of the two, I would choose the Verticalsim version. While the Orbx version is cheaper at around $14.88 US at the time of recording, the Verticalsim version is only a little under $2 more, and with that you get a considerable improvement in overall imagery used for non-paved areas, much more accurate paved areas throughout the airport grounds, more detailed buildings apart from a couple FBO name typos, and much more attention paid to the smaller details around the airport. The only advantages I can see for the Orbx version, excluding price, are the more accurate terminal modeling with the offset glass panes and accurate taxiway signs, as there were a few mislabelings on Verticalsim's. Other than that, the Verticalsim version of Boise Air Terminal is definitely the version to get if you're looking to pick this airport up, and I say that as someone who is not a big fan of their previous release of Omaha, our previous review. Verticalsim's Boise feels far superior to their Omaha in comparison. What are your thoughts? Let us know down in the comments which version of Boise you prefer and why. Did you pick up the Orbx version when it released and feel that buying the Verticalsim version is worth it again for the same airport? We'll see you in the next one.